Hello everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We've got a seriously packed board today. We're looking at the global news wrap-up for August 18th, 2026. And we're going to be connecting the dots on some incredibly complex, interconnected events. We're talking everything from active military fronts and shifting alliances, right down to crucial, high-stakes legal battles unfolding here in the United States. It's a lot to unpack, so let's get right into it.
Okay, let's dive into our map for the day. We'll start with escalating tensions in the Middle East, shift over to the Russia-Ukraine front, and then head east to look at some major shifts in Asian security. After that, we'll cover global elections and finally wrap things up with U.S. domestic news.
Section 1. Middle East tensions. Right now, we are seeing some incredible diplomatic nuance unfolding in Egypt surrounding the Gaza ceasefire talks. Hamas leaders have actually proposed demilitarizing the Gaza Strip. This is a massive proposal, and it was delivered directly to U.S. envoy Jared Kushner. Shortly after that communication, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with Kushner to evaluate the offer. But, while demilitarization is officially on the table, there is still major skepticism regarding how an agreement like that would actually be enforced on the ground. So we're at this absolutely critical moment of negotiation, trying to balance these sweeping proposals against the really harsh realities of implementation.
Meanwhile, the physical reality of all this regional tension is taking a very real toll on global shipping. Down in the Strait of Hormuz, the UK Maritime Trade Operations received reports that a U.S. commercial vessel was struck by an unknown projectile. And this wasn't just a near miss. The strike caused actual engine room damage and tragically resulted in one crew casualty. It really highlights the ongoing, tangible risks, the severe disruptions, and ultimately the human cost we're seeing in these critical maritime choke points.
So, in response to these widening tensions, we're starting to see regional powers step in to mediate. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan actually got on the phone with U.S. President Donald Trump, specifically urging direct diplomatic talks between Washington and Tehran. Erdogan's goal here is explicit de-escalation, and he's officially offering Turkish support to help facilitate those peace efforts. It's a very clear, strategic move by Turkey to position itself as a stabilizing diplomatic bridge in the region.
And the volatility isn't just isolated to those areas. Let's briefly zoom out and look at two other major flashpoints. Up in northwestern Syria, 8 Israeli airstrikes recently pounded the Abu al-Dihur military airbase, specifically targeting runways and ammo storage. And simultaneously, over in North Africa, the situation in Libya has deteriorated so much that the UN Security Council had to call an emergency session in New York. They're dealing with a dual crisis there, crippling political gridlock and escalating drone strikes that are directly hitting Libya's critical oil refineries.
And this brilliantly illustrates a much larger, interconnected problem. We're seeing this play out in real time. In northern Iraq, targeted drone strikes hit the office of the Kurdistan Regional Government's prime minister, as well as the intelligence chief's home. Regional authorities are pointing the finger at Iran, though Tehran denies it. But here's the really interesting part. Where is this tech coming from? European intelligence reports show that Russia is actively shipping drone components, ammunition, and explosives across the Caspian Sea to replenish Iran's stockpiles. So we're looking at a distinct flow of military tech that's sending massive ripple effects across the entire region.
Section 2. The Russia-Ukraine front. Over 600. That is a staggering number. Overnight, Ukrainian forces launched a massive aerial assault, sending over 600 drones aimed right at the Moscow region and surrounding Russian oblasts. The sheer scale and the coordination required for an attack of this magnitude is just immense. It represents a major operational push by Ukraine to bring the conflict deep into Russian airspace.
But we have to contrast that immediately with this number, 180. Russian defense officials reported they intercepted 180 of those incoming drones. So what does this tell us? It means that while the offensive was absolutely massive, the defensive net is also highly active. This led to widespread crash sites and collateral damage across several locations, as the drones that weren't intercepted either hit their targets or were brought down out of the sky. Shifting our focus back to the ground in Ukraine, we have to talk about the devastating human toll. Ukrainian regional officials reported that a Russian missile attack struck a village in the Kharkiv region. This single strike killed 10 civilians and caused massive damage to local infrastructure. It's just a really stark, sobering reminder of the continuous day-to-day tragedy this war inflicts on civilian populations.
Section 3. Shifts in Asian security.
Over in the Pacific theater, we're watching a very notable evolution in the diplomatic and military dynamic on the Korean Peninsula. U.S. and South Korean military commanders are actually scaling back their joint Ulchi Freedom Shield military drills. Alongside this, South Korean President Lee Jae-myung made a fascinating statement. He affirmed that the U.S. alliance is absolutely foundational to their security, but he strongly emphasized that South Korea must actively expand its own independent defense capabilities. It's a really delicate pivot, right? They're moving toward greater strategic autonomy while still trying to hold on to historical, foundational alliances.
Now, speaking of military challenges in the region, the U.S. 7th Fleet recently detailed a severe operational nightmare in the South China Sea. Get this timeline. On day 1, a U.S. Navy destroyer suffered a complete power loss, total blackout. By day 2, they had to halt all operations, no power systems whatsoever. By day 3, the crew is dealing with searing, middle-of-the-ocean heat with absolutely zero air conditioning. It wasn't until day 4 that this grueling power outage finally concluded. It is a visceral, real-world reminder of the immense logistical vulnerabilities that can suddenly strike even the most advanced naval warships out there.
Section 4. Global Elections and Security. Let's look at some democratic mandates. In Zambia, the Electoral Commission has officially declared incumbent President Hakainde Hichilema the winner of the presidential election. He secured a very solid 60% of the vote against the opposition, officially locking in a second term. It's a definitive, clear-cut mandate for the nation's political continuity moving forward.
Meanwhile, in South Asia, we are seeing two completely contradictory security narratives clashing head-on. Following some pre-Independence Day counterterrorism operations, Indian Home Minister Amit Shah announced the arrest of over 200 operatives, claiming they are directly linked to cross-border networks. But right across the border, Pakistan's Foreign Ministry put out a statement flatly rejecting those assertions. It is a textbook example of two directly opposing geopolitical narratives colliding over regional security.
Okay. We've covered a ton of ground internationally today, from maritime power failures to drone logistics and national elections. But I want to serve up a bit of a mental palate cleanser here. While all these military and diplomatic shifts are making the massive global headlines, how are legal battles quietly reshaping domestic policy right here at home? Let's pivot and bring our focus back to internal U.S. governance.
Section 5. U.S. Legal and Domestic News. On the structural governance front, a U.S. federal appeals court just handed down a massive ruling regarding executive branch appointments. The court officially rejected the administration's policy of delegating full authority to unconfirmed interim U.S. attorneys. Essentially, the court is stepping in to check the administration's strategy of bypassing the formal Senate confirmation process. It's a huge reaffirmation of the structural checks and balances required for these high-level judicial roles.
Finally, we've got to talk about a very high-stakes internal investigation making waves right now. The U.S. Department of Justice Inspector General has formally opened a probe into a highly controversial tactic used by the DEA. According to the review, the DEA intentionally allowed shipments of illicit drugs, and yes, that includes fentanyl, to actually reach communities. The stated goal here was to track these shipments in order to uncover and dismantle broader, higher-level distribution networks. So the Inspector General is now investigating the massive risks involved with this operation. Choice. They are having to weigh the value of gathering high-level cartel intelligence against the immediate, literal danger of letting a substance as lethal as fentanyl slip into civilian areas.
And that leaves us with a truly profound question to ponder as we wrap up today. When you step back and look at the entire board, from European intelligence tracking Russian drone components floating across the Caspian Sea to fuel strikes in the Middle East, all the way to the DEA deliberately tracking illicit fentanyl shipments moving through American communities, you really have to ask yourself, how are these vast, interconnected, and often hidden global supply chains ultimately shaping the future of our security? It just goes to show, doesn't it? In today's world, no single event ever happens in a vacuum. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking those big questions, keep looking at the structure behind these events, and I will see you next time.